We are about to embark on an immersive journey through the corridors of our minds. Stand by as we prepare for departure.
Welcome aboard, everyone, to the Productivity with Peace of Mind podcast adventure. Our journey will begin in just a moment. Inhale deeply and exhale. Our voyage takes us on a captivating tour, diving deep into the intricate layers of our thoughts and imagination. Brace yourselves for the complexities of our evolution. For a safe and enjoyable journey, stay seated, secure your helmet and protective goggles, and keep hands, feet, and legs inside while the ride is moving. Now relax and enjoy.
Today we have with us Beth Binger, who is on a mission to inspire women through solo road trips. So I thought this was so cool when I got to know Beth and learned about what she was doing. But she has an extensive experience in road tripping with her buddy, the golden retriever Lexi, who travels along with her, which I think is amazing. And then she has a book, which I now have a copy of, and the message conveys for us how to find joy and confidence within ourselves through that solo adventure. So, welcome, Beth. It is so great to have you here today.
Awesome. Thank you. What a nice introduction.
Yeah, it's so great to have you. And so you kind of reclaimed your life and, found your way forward through this kind of solo trip
Mhm.
idea. How did that happen and how did that evolve and how did that find its way to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it wasn't something I went searching for, that's for sure.
Um,
Um, as many, I think all women, once you get to a certain point in your life, you're going to go through something. Something unexpected is going to happen, or maybe expected, but a big shift in your life, a change, a transformation. And so that happened to me. I had been married for 26 years, and then all of a sudden I wasn't. And it was a really difficult time. And so I had adult children who were, finding their own way in life. And so all of a sudden it was just me and the dogs at that point. And so I had grown up in a family where, we didn't have a lot, but we always traveled to as much as we could. And usually that meant like being in the back of the pickup truck, with the cap on it and driving somewhere. But I had this instinctive feeling that I just wanted to go explore and that I could because now I was
mm,
on my own. And so it was this weird juxtaposition of freedom I wasn't really looking for, and
mm,
then also just trying to really take a hold of that and do something with it, but not really sure what to do. So I decided to plan a road trip. I had spent so many years where I didn't have any space that was just mine. That was very
mm.
crowded space. I felt like my life was just
Yeah.
very, there was just a lot of noise. And so now it was
Yeah.
quiet and I wanted to be quiet and I wanted to go do something. And so I felt like, and as a Christian, I felt also like this is where I was being led. So I didn't feel like I was
Yeah.
just completely doing this on my own. So I planned this little road trip. I spent several weeks just kind of with the maps and figuring it all out. And I drove from Virginia, where I was living at the time, to the Florida Keys. And my rule was that I would not drive on any highways and that I would go as slow as I wanted to. I would stop wherever I wanted to. I really didn't have two nickels to rub together at that point because this was a new part of my life where all of a sudden money was a massive thing. So I slept in my car. I car camped a little bit. I figured out how to do that. And I just took my time and I went to visit friends down in the Keys. And then I did the same thing on the way back. And I wasn't really looking for transformation, but it happened. And what I learned
Mm,
was that I spent a lot of time looking out. driving on these country roads in these small towns and really looking out instead of dwelling on myself. I mean,
Mm,
I didn't go like as a hurt puppy to run away. I wasn't
yeah,
a running away adventure. This was a more of a just a deep breath, I guess, more than anything. And it was
yeah,
incredibly fulfilling and transformational because what I discovered was just this calm and peace and um, confidence that was slowly growing as I traveled, that I can do these things on my own and I'm actually killing it. Like I'm actually really loving what I'm doing, and I'm meeting people along the way if I want to, but not all the time. And just to, I think I use the word reclaim a lot, or redefine, a lot of re's, right?
yeah,
Redefine sort of who I, and recover probably is the best one, um, who I really was, because I had been identified as somebody else's this for so long that you just I think you inherently lose a piece of yourself. And that wasn't all bad. There was such a lovely part of that too. But now it was just me, and
yeah,
I was reclaiming and rediscovering the things that I really love to do and the things that really spoke to me and the glory of like creation and just how beautiful the world is and how beautiful small town people are. And it was just the most wonderful, wonder-filled time. It was 3 weeks or 2 weeks, I guess, 2.5 weeks. And I came back completely hooked and totally changed, and have just never stopped since then.
that's so cool. And I know you have now helped, beyond your own initial road trip and the ones you continue to take, you've now helped others who were maybe struggling to find some of that joy in their own life, start to road trip and do some of these solo travels on
Yeah.
their own. How has that gone? And how are they connecting with what you're showing them how to do?
Yeah, that's been from the beginning, like this, a completely unexpected part of all of,
Yeah.
because it certainly wasn't what I intended. I started a blog when I first started traveling on my own, partly because I've always been a writer, but also because I wanted to shut down and I wanted to process for one thing, and I process well on paper, but also I just didn't really want to talk to a lot of people when I was gone.
Yeah.
I needed to just kind of be. And so this was a way for people to know, like my family to know, because people thought I was crazy at that point for doing this in some part. And so it was a way to connect with people without really talking to them. But the
Yeah.
unexpected part of that was that because I was publishing it, I started getting a lot of feedback from women
Mm,
saying, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you're doing that." Or, that is the coolest thing. How do I do that? Can you show me how to do that? I'm afraid to do
yeah.
that. And so it turned into a steadier blog over a couple of years that whenever I traveled, I would write. And then eventually it turned into a book, and it's turned into a YouTube channel and all these things where I'm connecting with people, many people on a daily basis now, to be able to share with them, the hows of what I'm doing. And then the feedback is just so fun. I just love hearing from all these women who are, dipping their toe in the water or just going for it and just gaining confidence and doing these things on their own, which is amazing.
Yeah, that is. I mean, what an incredible way to, make an impact in other people's lives and really empower them to, take action and kind of take that control back for themselves and something that they can be completely, on top of. So,
Yeah.
you also have these things called treasure maps and pillars of planning. Can you
Right.
share with us some of those things that you, teach for the women that you're sharing your travels with?
Yeah, sure. And like I said, I think one of the big hangups for people who would see an example or me model that what I was doing was, how do I do this for myself? It just all feels really
Yeah.
overwhelming. And so I realized when I sat down to really write the book about it, that it's really two parts. And maybe we can talk more about the, emotional, transformational part in a bit, but I knew there had to be a
Yeah.
practical piece to it, because at the end of the day, people could be super inspired, but if they don't feel confident in the steps to actually make it happen,
Yeah.
they're not going to do it, right? So, um, as I was writing, I realized that a lot of the planning that I do starts out with what I call a treasure map. And it's really the idea of just brainstorming all those things and places that you've never been that are
Mm.
interesting to you. And so I encourage people to start out even with if they're going to go, to multiple states, to start out with a US map and one that has stickers on it or something that where they can mark it and just start having fun brainstorming all the places they'd like to go. And I teach people where to get this information if they're stumped. And I write a lot in the book about things like inspiration from books and movies and podcasts and articles that they might read. But it could be from blog posts, it could be from conversations, magazine articles. I've been inspired by so many different things. A lot of my inspiration comes from books, I will say, and visual documentaries and things. And then just start putting all that on the map. And then there's something about that that makes it just that much more real then. It's not just a pie in the sky
Yeah.
idea, like, oh, I'd love to go to Glacier National Park one day. Well, putting that little pin on the map and seeing where you are compared to where it is, I don't know, there's something kind of transformative about that, I think, or it's
Okay.
encouraging about
Yeah.
that. And so that's sort of the treasure map concept, is to just have this US map, or if you're going to stay closer to home, a state map or two, and just start marking all those things that are exciting and interesting to you. And you won't get to do them all at once, but it's a great place to start. So that's the treasure map part. The pillars of planning was really this thing that I wish I had come up with a better name for it, but that's the best I could do. And it's just basically breaking up those foundational pieces that you need to understand and take at least some action towards in your preparation. And they are, understanding your time and your distance, how much time you have, how far you can go, and just sort of figuring that out so that you can navigate well. And then it's about food and lodging and then safety. So those are the things that I really talk in depth and wrote whole chapters about in the book as I was
Yeah.
doing, to really, use those pillars so that the house stands up and that you can really enjoy, all of it. But if you don't at least put some effort towards some of that, then it is, you lose confidence and you just don't feel like you're ready to actually pull out of the driveway and go. Oh, packing, that's another one that's in there too.
Oh,
So.
yeah. I suppose that's important.
Yes, it is. It is. It is. And I'm getting ready to leave in 3 days on a massive road trip. And so that one is
Oh,
actually,
nice.
it's kind of at the top of my mind. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I bet. Well, and you mentioned the emotional piece too.
Yeah.
There's this kind of, movement that has to happen, right? That you've talked about where you go from fear to confidence.
Hmm.
What would you say is the number one thing that shows up, whether it's like a question or a challenge for the women that you're helping, as far as like, okay, how do I actually, do that? And then how do you help them move through that?
Yeah. I think it, I don't know that, let me back up a little bit. I feel like the number one thing that people feel overwhelmed by is just they can see themselves standing on some mountaintop somewhere, or they can see themselves sitting on sitting outside a little cafe with a cappuccino and, but they have a hard time imagining when they step back. They're like, yeah, but I'm sitting on my couch right now, and how do I get from A to B? And I think for a lot of women, it stops right there. They're just content to dream
Mm,
about it a little bit. So, and there's fear in just, how do I do this for myself? How do I figure it
yeah.
out? So I think that's probably the biggest thing. It's sort of that unknown. So many women have never done something kind of big on their own. Um,
Mm,
so I think that's a big piece of it initially, is just giving them the tools so that they can literally have, whether it's checklists that you need, or you just need someone to hold your hand and say, this is the next thing you do, and this is the next thing you do, to just, it's like that snowball of confidence that starts rolling as you do the planning. And I realize not everybody is a meticulous planner, and you don't have to be at all. But it's still, there are things that definitely contribute to our confidence. And I think for most women, it is taking some of the unknown away for sure, right? And then safety is the other one. There's just legitimate, like literal fear of doing something on their own because of what could happen. But I would say that's also very much fear of the unknown, because it's very, very unlikely that anything is going to happen, right? But there are things that you can do to fortify yourself, to, and to be prepared. And I think a lot of
Yeah.
that is really about taking the power of that back and controlling it for
Yeah.
yourself. Now you can't control everything, and you shouldn't try, you got to leave room for that. The whole thing that I preach is, finding wonder. And you can't, I don't think you can really seek freedom and wonder and joy and peace if you are holding on with like both hands, in fear of everything. So there's a letting go process. But I think as you prepare yourself before you go, and you can identify the things that really stress you out, how do you manage those ahead of time and have a plan for those? I think that's probably the best thing.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like really just kind of like almost planning those guardrails
Yeah.
of like, okay, these are the things that are going to make me feel safe. And then here's the space that I'm going to plan for that will be more, spacious and wondrous and, where I can just explore.
Yes, 100%, 100%. Yeah, so for example, I'm leaving in 3 days to drive. I'll be gone for 5 weeks, which is going to be an all-time long one for me, honestly. It's a long time to
Nice.
be away from home with a dog, and away from, I have a house and I have a life here and whatever. So,
Yeah.
um, for me, I cannot wait to be on the road and just have that freedom to drive down the little lane that looks interesting, or, oh my gosh, I think there's a waterfall up here, or I really want to check out this town, and have no worries about whatever it is that I want to do. But I can do
Yeah.
that because for the last couple of weeks at home, I'm doing all of the things behind the scenes to plan to make sure that I will then be able to let loose and let go and just enjoy my time on the road. So that's me really understanding my own penchant for planning and what the level of which makes me comfortable without
Yeah.
overdoing it. Because you can definitely overplan too, to where you're
Yeah.
like, I have to get to here today, or I have this reservation, and I think it does take some time to kind of find a happy balance for people. So I think it's a great opportunity to really learn a lot about yourself in so many
Yeah.
different ways. And you're probably going to make a mess of it a little bit the first time, but I mean, I definitely did. But oh my gosh, I was completely hooked after I did it too. It was just, it's great. So anyway, I don't know if that's helpful.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean that's amazing. And then, you talk about kind of the true prize or the true, treasure, if you will, that you get out of these trips. What does that look like, beyond just like taking a trip and, getting some
Yeah.
confidence? What really is that kind of true prize that we get out of taking a trip like this and doing something like this for ourselves?
Right. I think there's a few things, because there's the prizes of what happens while you're gone, right? So
Mm,
there's these moments that, and if I can back up for a second,
yeah.
in the book I talk a lot about trying to figure out where you want to go based on a couple of things. And it's based on things like your passion, your tears, and your treasures. So, what are the things you feel so passionate about in life? And is there something connected to that you can go do or see or explore when you're on a road trip? What are the things that you treasure? So if you like, I have a friend who is just an avid quilter, loves to quilt, And so she has taken trips where she's gone to quilting workshops or gone to quilting,
Mm.
museums and things. And so we all have those things in our life, right? That just things that are meaningful to us and hold meaning. Maybe you're a huge baseball fan, there's a million different things. And then the tears part are, what are the things that make you cry, but in a good way? That you just have that. And this to me is the idea of wonder, which is the concept of the book, is this: what are the things that you have explored or seen in your life, or experiences that you have where you just immediately just have this well of emotion that makes you cry? And we all
Mm.
know what that feels like, right? And it usually takes us by surprise, so you can't really plan.
Yeah.
But how can you put yourself in situations where, if you know that, like, I'll go back to like waterfalls. If you know like a majestic waterfall
Mm.
just does it for you, like you should go do
Yeah.
that when you're on your trip, right?
Yeah.
Or if it's just something in a town that's just really quaint, or I don't know, we all have our things. But I think
Yeah.
that if you hone in on those things that are important to you, that is those things will lend themselves to transformation when you are traveling. You will inherently find those things. So for me, one of those things, I love a good back road. Just the idea of
Yeah.
not knowing where that road goes and just really wanting to find out, um,
Yeah.
that does it for me. And it's because there's been enough times where I've driven around a corner and just been like, oh my gosh, just something that just strikes me. And it could be something little and it could be something massive. And so that's why I called my book There's Wonder Around the Bend, because that is
Yeah.
that feeling for me. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the in trip kind of transformation, or the change, or the prize, as you said it, the
Yeah.
real prize. But I think there's also this thing that happens when you're done, which is
Mm.
there is a shift and there is a change, and you will be inherently more confident. Maybe you'll be more comfortable in your own skin. Maybe you'll be more okay being by yourself. And I think that prize can be different for everybody. I'm sure it is different for everybody, and how you actually
Yeah.
define that. But it's real. And I found that even though after my inherent 2-week road trip, I came back wanting to do more, but
Yeah.
I think I was able to handle all the yuckiness that was happening in my life at that
Mm.
time. I just, I was able to stand a little taller, feel a little bit more confident, comfort. I always use the word confidence and comfort. Those are just the things that I think I gained. And I think that most people will gain from an experience like this. And one of the cool things that I've found is that when I wrote this book, I really, and all along, my ideal client was always, or my ideal reader was always someone like me, right? Some
Mm.
someone in the middle of their life who's going through some sort of, traumatic experience or big shift and change. Their parents maybe have passed away, or they're retiring, or they're empty nesting, or they're now maybe their spouse has passed away, or they're divorced, all of those things. But what I found out after I released the book was that 80% of the people on my YouTube channel are men. um, my book, for whatever reason, is really touching millennial women as well, who haven't gone through all these things, but yet super identify with the idea of it. So
Yeah.
I'm just blown away by that. But what I also realized is that I just needed to look around a little bit more and realize that this is something that can serve all of us, and that we all need to have some time to just really pause in our lives and look out and look and seek wonder in our lives, and not just be caught up in the day to day, whether there's trauma in it or not. So sorry, that
Yeah.
was a long answer to your question.
No, it was a great answer. And I want to say, like, let's just say we walk into your office and we walk into the room with you and we want to get started. We have an idea, but we don't really know where to start. Like, how do you help us dream that up and start to plan for something like that, especially for those who've never done anything like that before? Like, where do you have them start?
Yeah, that's such a good question, and I think that answer is going to change a little bit on the practical side moving forward
Yeah.
because I am trying to figure out what that whether it's a community or courses that I want to build in order
Yeah.
to have a very clear pathway for people. So for sure, right now there are a few things. The most obvious one is to read the book because it really is all right
Yeah.
there. It does walk people through all of the concept of wonder and the building of that and helping them dream a little bit and then encouraging them on the solo piece and then sort of training them in the step by step as you go, and even a chapter on taking your dog on the road with you. um so but I also have a YouTube channel where every week I have a video on something practical normally, ways to whether because I do a lot of camping too. That's kind of my one of my loves that I've found out of all this, which I did not do before. And so teaching people about camping or teaching people about safety and all the different things. Um, so those are the main things right now that I'm doing. And I think if when people contact me and ask questions, right now I point them to the book because I feel like that's the best resource for it for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And in the book, what's the first thing you have them do or reflect on?
Gosh, and that's a good point because throughout the book, especially the first 6 chapters, there are
Mhm.
journal prompts worked into that because the biggest thing
Okay.
that I wanted to convey in this, or one of the biggest things I wanted to convey in this book is that I'm going to share my pathway with you, my story, where I'm coming from and what happened. But I'm
Yeah.
not writing this for me. I'm writing this for you. I want
Yeah.
to equip and inspire you to have the space
Mhm.
to do this. So it's really wanting to give people the kind of, I guess, to make that shift. So while I start out in the book sort of painting a picture of like, this was my scenario, it very quickly is shifting into the idea of wonder for them. What would it look like for
Okay.
you? How do you like, so it's dreaming with them a lot in the beginning and asking them some specific questions, not so open-ended that you just kind of sit there and go, I don't know, right? So it's some
Yeah.
specific kind of probing things to help them find their way in the beginning for sure. That, it's like a funnel. It starts with this big, big ideas, and then we get down to something more and more practical as we go, and something very doable for them by the end.
Yeah. Okay. So there's some like dreaming and reflecting and journaling that really happens kind of before you even get to, where do
Absolutely.
I want to go and the actual planning piece. Did you want to share some examples of some of the questions and journal prompts that you start them with in the book?
Sure. And I think it's fun because we've all been children. So
Yeah.
it's kind of where I start because when I think about the idea of wonder, I think very often we
Yeah.
all think about childlike wonder. We think about,
Mhm.
everything's new and exciting. And I know we all did not have idyllic childhoods, but usually there's something that you can point back to in your childhood that brought you great joy. And so I tell a couple stories in the early part of my book, one in particular about as it relates to travel, that first time that I can vividly remember experiencing one massive wonder in my life. And it was a
Mhm.
trip to the Grand Tetons when I was 12. And so I asked people to think about their own childhoods. And after explaining what that story was like and the feelings that I had, and I asked readers to dwell on their own childhoods. What is it from your childhood that sparked joy or sparked wonder in your life? And that usually helps them begin the dreaming process a little bit. Or what are the feelings that they would like to reclaim from their childhood that they maybe don't feel like they're experiencing at this point in their life. And, as we get older, from the time we're maybe college age and after that, our lives shift into the practical in so many ways, right? We're adulting, we
Yeah.
have bills to pay,
Mhm.
we have, all the things to do, we have jobs. And so I think sadly we let some of that slide out of our life, and all of a sudden it's gone before we even realized that it's not there anymore. And so this is a purposeful reclamation of kind of re-identifying what some of those feelings are. And if those are connected to places, to have them jot down some places. So there are journal in throughout the book, in the first part of the book, there are pages that are made for journaling and writing down thoughts. And yeah, so the first few chapters are really just a lot of me storytelling, but then bringing that back, and so that people can identify with that and make it their own, so that they can begin to tell their own story.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And I think just sharing your story first, you're also kind of leading by example of like, this is possible. Here's what it looked like for me. Here's my transformation, and here's what's possible for you. And then having them reflect on, what did bring you joy and
Yeah.
wonder as a child, and how can we bring that back into your life now? I think that is so magical, and like what a powerful transition you're taking them through.
Yeah, and I think one of the coolest things about it though is that it's theirs, It's not mine. I'm
Right.
not trying to put anything on them. I think I just want people to know what's possible. And
Yeah.
there's I don't know, it's just that idea of like seeing people light up again and just be like, wow, this is, something that they hadn't really thought about in a long time. Especially
Yeah.
if you've gone through some sort of experience that sort of left you feel beaten down a little bit, or lost, or just
Yeah.
tired. And I think especially when people have lost someone, that's probably the
Mhm.
most profound thing that happens in our lives, is when we lose
Yeah.
someone. Um, then I think, especially if it's a parent or a spouse, or, obviously the very worst, a child, where so much of your identity is tied up in who you were to that person if they were very close to you. So we're
Yeah.
somebody's daughter, we're somebody's wife or girlfriend or mother, and then to have that piece removed from our lives, inevitably you're going to feel lost on some level. And so I think this really helps just create space for us to kind of figure that out slowly and give ourselves the opportunity to do it. And I always tell people, you can sit on your couch and figure this out, but how much more wonderful to put yourself in a beautiful place and space, and someplace meaningful to you, and more of an
Mhm.
exploratory mode, um, that I think opens our minds and opens our eyes and our ears and our heart to possibility and change and freedom, that we can't encounter all of that from our couch. I'm sorry.
Right, right. Well, it's really interesting. Even as you're talking, I'm thinking about like for my own, childhood wonder and awe.
Hmm.
It might sound a little bit cliche, but my parents would take us to Disney. And,
Oh, yeah.
to experience that as a child was truly magical, right? And to go back as an adult, I think it was a year or two ago now, was something I never thought that I would do, but I ended up doing it spontaneously because we were
Oh,
on kind of a random trip, and it was a couple hours away. So we just got in the car and drove and
uh-huh.
found, the parks that I went to as a kid, and to re-experience that and find kind of the mystical magic of that was really a cool experience in adulthood that I
Yeah.
never even imagined that I would want to do again. You know what I mean?
Right. No, that's a perfect example, actually, and one that's very relatable for a lot of people. I think especially people in your generation, because a lot of people
Yeah.
did grow up. Like, I didn't grow up going to Disney. So my first time to Disney was in my, I think, late teens or 20s or something. But and
Mm.
it doesn't hold that same meaning for me because
Yeah.
of that, right?
Yeah.
But that's what Disney is for, right? That's sort of the whole idea behind, what was it called? This show when I was a kid, it was called The Wonderful World of Disney. And it is that
Yeah.
wonder is built into the DNA. It's manufactured wonder on some level, right? But it's not,
Yeah, yeah,
but it's still,
for
it's
sure.
very palpable and very real. And yeah, and so it's amazing to me. I didn't know this until a couple years ago. The sheer amount of adults that is, they don't have children, but they go to Disney every year. Like that's what they do. And that just would
Yeah,
never come to me. But because I think that's what people, we're all seeking that in some way. And
yeah,
when you do have those experiences as a child, wherever they might be at the beach, right? Or they might be at a cabin in the mountains, or wherever they may be, we remember those feelings and we want those back at some point because
yeah,
we identify with the idea of just joy and no problems. We identify with that idea of just freedom and not a care in the world and, that type of thing. And we all want that. And I think the more you go through as an adult, the thought of being able to go back to that, even for a little bit, is pretty tempting. But I do also want to caution people that, and I did write about this in the book too, that it's not a running away type of experience. So
yeah,
if you're going through something really rotten and you just desperately want to leave all your problems behind, I can help you plan a road trip to do that, but they're going to be there when you come back, right? All those
right.
problems or whatever they are. So I think that's partly why I spent so much time ahead in the front section of the book, really delving into, the why of it and before we
Yeah,
get to the how of it, because I really wanted it to be, first of all, I wanted to share my experience in a way that made it possible for others. But I didn't, I wasn't running away when I did that. I could have, but it didn't turn out like that. And so I really want people to be able to explore that idea of preparing yourselves in a way and really thinking through it, preparing your heart and your mind before you go so that it is a fulfilling experience and it's something you can bring back with you and be transformed instead of, oh my gosh, I'm home now. All the heavy is back. And now I ran away, but I brought it all with me.
so it sounds like this is a really a process of what are we creating versus what are we avoiding
Yeah,
when we go on this journey.
that's a lovely way to say it. Yeah. Yeah, you're really
Yeah,
building something. You're not
yeah,
just leaving something behind kind of thing, right?
yeah.
So I think that's a really important way to look at it as well. Because it is, I look at it as a new beginning, as a new start. Um, I don't think of exploring and adventure and journey. Those aren't words I connect to running away.
And then you have some free gifts for us. So if you want
I,
to share a little bit about those.
I do. I'm so excited to share this with you all. So when I wrote There's Wonder Around the Bend, an inspiring guide for solo road tripping. So when I wrote the book, I realized, especially when I got into the more practical pieces, that there was no way that everything that I wanted to give to people was actually going to fit in the book. So I have a
Yeah.
lot of bonus resources that really have been 6 years in the making because I've made a lot of mistakes, first of all. So I've done things like bought gear that didn't work, tried it, took it for 5,000 miles with me, threw it away, made bad decisions about time management or budgeting. So I've done all the wrong things. And I really wanted to, if I was going to inspire readers through this book, I didn't want them to just epically fail in a lot of the ways that I did. And so I decided that I wanted to provide resources that would really help people from and keep people from, tripping over themselves all the time. So it's been a process for me to figure out what's really works for me, lots of trial and error. Um, but I never really found good resources for myself when I was searching for them, especially ones that were all in one place. So I determined when I wrote the book that I was going to create resources for people that would be very doable, super helpful. Um, and now that's what I've done. And they don't have an expiration date. It's lifetime access to all of the goodies that I've compiled and curated over the years. So, and it's not, I feel like it's a huge thing that people get. And normally people buy the book and then they get the link in the book for access to all of that. But for you and your listeners today, what I'd like to do is put the cart before the horse and give you all access in advance. So, of course, you're going to probably want to buy the book then, but as of today, you can get forever access to all the resources. So, what that includes are things like links and access to all the very best websites and apps that I use for navigation, all my packing lists for camping, for hiking, just for being on the road, organizing, a lot of my organizational tips, even how to take your dog on the road, all the things you need for that, in-depth safety information. And then the journal that we talked about, some of those journal entries, I've actually put all the journal stuff together in a PDF, and I just called it the Wonder Journal. And that's something that is a downloadable resource as well. And maybe best of all, you get access to what I call Bing's Things, which is an evergreen list of all my favorite gear. So everything from tents and coolers to camping stuff, all my favorite maps, safety items, food related things, planning tools, all of that is in there as well. So in the end, having access to all this is going to cut your own planning time in half. It'll also save you money and you don't have to buy things that you don't need. And it really will help build confidence, I think, for people. And having in the background a solid guide who's been there and done that. So I hope that your listeners can use the link in the notes and go to it's wonderbingtravel.com/book-resources so that they can get lifetime access to all of the resources. And I do change them over time because things change and there's always new gear, especially. So I like people to have the best stuff.
Thank you so much for all of that and for sharing that with us, because that in itself sounds like a treasure trove of things that you're offering us. And my final question for you, Beth, is going to be, what is the significance of going at this alone? There's the solo piece of these adventures that you're teaching, and why
Right.
is that important?
Such a good question. So important, obviously, to the whole thing. And I am teaching this from a perspective of solo road tripping, which is not to say that you shouldn't buy the book and use all the planning tools, and you can definitely do that with other people. And I do
Yeah,
travel with other people too. I'm not an only going solo person, but I think
yeah,
there's a really important reason to do it by yourself. And we've touched
yeah,
on it here and there throughout for sure. But doing a solo road trip, even if it's just for a day, or if it's for a month or whatever, is a very different thing than doing it with anybody else, even with your best friend, even with your spouse or someone you know you can travel really well with. Because inevitably, when you're with another person, you're talking a lot, usually, right? So you end up being more focused on what's happening inside the car. Or even if you stop to see something, you're still focused on each other instead of, so I call it looking out instead of looking in. And so I think it's so much easier to do that. We have so much noise in our lives too, that solo road tripping allows us to completely control that and turn that off. So a lot of times
yeah.
I travel with, other than my GPS, I travel with my phone, everything on silent. A lot of times I don't even listen to music or podcasts. I just want to be. And we don't do that very often in our lives. Our lives,
Right.
especially when we have the world in our pockets here all the time, it's so easy to constantly have some information coming into our brains. So going by yourself, then it just it creates opportunity to cut all of that out. Um, and then there's some really fun little things about doing it by yourself because you get to go wherever you want. You can stop whenever you want. It doesn't matter when anybody else has to go to the bathroom or when anybody else, other than for me, it's the dog. But yeah, so there's just a lot of freedom in just making your own choices. And I think as women, and I know I can't speak for all women, but a lot of women I know, and myself included, I tend to be a pleaser. And so if I have anybody else with me, I'm definitely thinking about,
Mhm.
are they happy? Are they interested in what we're doing? Gosh, I wonder if this is not a plan that really works for them today. Gosh, is she thinking that she needs to stop, but she's not telling? Like all of those things are running through my head. Is this a good restaurant for both of us? Is this a good, stopping place for both of us? Um, all of that goes out the window. And I want to stop short of making it sound like I'm being selfish because it's not like me, I get to do all the things for me. But because we don't normally live like that, I think there's freedom that comes with that, not
Yeah.
necessarily just selfishness, right? It's the freedom. It takes a lot of the pressure off. Um, and the other side of that is you're all by yourself, so you have to make all the decisions. So there's
Mm.
sometimes things happen where you're like, oh, I really wish someone else was here to do this or help me figure this out. But that's where you just sort of have to suck it up and figure it out. Sometimes you can call somebody or whatever, and I haven't had any big issues on the road, but there's just sometimes where you think, oh, it'd be kind of nice to have somebody else here. But there is a lot of benefit in pushing past that or pushing through that. And for people who aren't normally by themselves and are worried about being lonely, I can say that I never get lonely. Um, if I want to talk to somebody, I'll pick up the phone and call them, or I'll FaceTime them if I'm seeing something awesome that I just really want to share with somebody for a moment. Um, but I think it's really good for us to learn to be okay by ourselves. And for a lot of us, we don't do that. And we feel, especially, I think younger generation has grown up with access to all this information all the time. And so quiet is
Yeah.
not something a lot of, 20 somethings especially have done. And it's a real training ground for that. And one that I think has enormous benefit for all of us to be able to just know ourselves better. And it helps us make better decisions when we are with other people and helps us just be better people. I hope that helps.
Yeah, it does. And it just goes back to like, the idea that we said before, this is something we're creating. This is
Yeah.
something we're creating for ourselves. Like this is ours to, make it what we want it to be. And I'm glad you mentioned the quiet piece and the book and podcasts and radio
Yeah.
piece, not necessarily just being on the whole time, because that's something I would do. I'm like, okay, well, if I'm by myself, I'm going to crank out all these books and
Yep.
podcasts and these
Right.
things that I want to listen to. And so also recognizing that, taking some of that time to just truly be in silence
Yeah.
with
Silence
yourself.
is good. I think one thing that happens is that I think so I think about my road trip coming up here in a couple of days, and the
Yes.
majority of my road trip is going to be spent I live in Pennsylvania. The majority of it's going to be spent in Wyoming, Montana, and Colorado. So it's kind of a long way
Okay.
to get there. So my goal this summer is really
Yes.
more about getting there and then being there for several
Yeah.
weeks and, the deep
Yeah.
sigh when I'm there. So I am going to spend some
Yeah.
time on the highways getting there. So when I do that,
Yeah.
on those highway days, I am more likely to make the phone calls, listen to an audiobook or a podcast, or, listen to the playlist and all of that, because I really am just sort of marking time to some extent. But once I'm
Yeah. Okay.
doing the wandering, wondering part where I can
Yeah.
really slowing down, then it's done. Then I don't want any of that. I don't want the distraction of that because I'm
Right.
experiencing just incredible things that I've never seen before. And even the little things that maybe you wouldn't go seeking and thinking, I'm going to see this
Yeah.
incredible thing today. It's all the little
Yeah.
things along the way that if you're too busy focused on something internally in your car, you're going to miss it. And you're just not going to get that same experience. So I think there's time for both for sure. And that's the balance that I have found over time. Absolutely.
Okay. I really like that, because you're right. There are times where there's nothing to really look at. You are just kind of like getting past the time. And then there's times where you do want to be intentional and really like,
Mhm.
look for that wonder. So that's really
Yeah.
helpful.
Right. And that's really the point for me, is
Yeah.
to seek wonder. I mean, if I can, you know, take all my road tripping experiences and my goals and break it down into 2 words, that's what I'm doing. I'm seeking wonder. And so many things come
Mm,
from that eventually, but that's the goal. And I can't seek wonder with, the news blaring or podcast or whatever. I'm just there. I'm just cutting off opportunities right and left when I do that because and again, I come back to from a Christian perspective, I'm looking at all that God has created for us to enjoy and
yeah.
see in this world. And I am here in a new place I've never been before. I want to give it 100% of my attention so that it can really wash over me in a way that, divided, if I have divided attention, it just can't happen.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of just like being present for
Mhm.
what's laid out
Absolutely.
in front of us.
100% present. And again, you just, no matter how much you love the person sitting next to you, in
Mhm.
rare instances, can you do that? Can you be present for that purpose for long periods of time? It's just not the way we're made to be in community ultimately. So
Yeah.
that's our go-to, but there are times for refueling and reclaiming and all of these things that we benefit from sometime just on our own.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you so much
Mm,
for being here today. Thank you for sharing your journey and what you've learned along the way with us. This has been incredible, and just learning how we can create our own adventure and find ourselves again a little bit better. Thank you so
well,
much.
thank you. And I hope people will buy the book just because I so desperately want women and men to have this experience. And so
Yeah,
if I can help them just take a step towards that and build confidence, I feel like the whole point of the book is to build confidence for people.
okay.
So if
Yeah,
if it serves to, and it already is, I know from just feedback that I've gotten that it is the thing that is literally getting people from A to B. So I hope that people will do that, and they can find it on Amazon and in bookstores as well. So, but I'm sure you can put the link down in your show notes too, right?
absolutely. Yep. The link to the resources and the book and everything will be in the show notes below.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. This has been so fun, Lindsay. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you for braving the inside of your mind with me. The better we understand ourselves, the more deeply we understand the world. And as our awareness grows, life just gets better and better. If you've enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave a review and share this with anyone else you think could benefit from listening. A quick reminder that the content shared in this podcast is for informational purposes only. I am not a licensed therapist, and the discussions here are not a substitute for professional advice. If you're dealing with a specific issue or need personalized guidance, please consult with a qualified professional. Your well being is important, and this podcast is simply a platform for sharing insights and experiences. I appreciate you spending this time with me. Until next time.